Hey everyone, how's it going? So about a year ago, I decided to do a run that in the community is commonly called a Pacifist run. A run where you can use any Pokemon you want, but you can't use any damaging moves. In case you don't know, there are three types of moves if you scroll over a move in Pokemon. There's physical moves, special moves, and status moves. We can only use those third type of moves, status moves, and see if we can beat the entire game. We were able to do so in Gold and Silver, some of the earliest games in the series. Now let's see if we can do so in Scarlet and Violet, the newest entry in the Pokemon series. Scarlet and Violet are actually pretty interesting games in the series, and I'd love to give a more formal review another time, but for today's video, I just want to focus on this run because there are quite a lot of things to do. For those of you who don't know, the game is essentially open world. There are 8 gyms, as well as 5 Titans and 5 battles with the evil team or the antagonist team, Team Star. So we're going to have to do all those things. And you know what? I can tell this video already is going to be a really long one, so let's get started. The first major battle I did was against Cloth because it gives you the ability to run in the overworld, and running in an open world game is pretty useful. Now, another thing you're going to notice is that the battles are going to go by pretty fast because they take a really long time. A Pokemon that proved incredibly useful in Gold and Silver, which is available in Scarlet and Violet, is the Hoppip. In this case, it's going to be Skiploom. Now, Skiploom knows Leech Seed, Poison Powder, and Sleep Powder, and you can see despite the fact Cloth has a massive health bar, Leech Seed and Poison Powder still do the regular amount of damage. That's pretty helpful because otherwise this battle would take a pretty long time. Pretty much the strategy here is to use Leech Seed and Poison Powder and just stall Cloth. Now, thankfully, we can do that also by Terastallizing. Terastallizing, for those of you who aren't used to the newer games, basically changes your Pokemon's type. Now, Pokemon you catch in the wild will always have the Terra type of one of their actual types, and thankfully the Hoppip I had was Terra Grass, removing my flying typing and thus the weakness to rock. I also have Arcanine that has Flash Fire instead of Intimidate. There's pros and cons to this, but basically I just switched to a bunch of different Pokemon, including my Vivillon. Honestly, just to show off the Pokemon you're going to see a little bit later, and eventually Cloth faints. But for those of you who don't know, you actually have to fight these Titan Pokemon twice, and the second time, Arven comes in with one of his Pokemon to help you out, which makes things quite a lot faster because Arven's Pokemon actually attack. Arven sends out Shellder, and once again, it's just simply a matter of stalling out the Cloth. Now, both Leech Seed and Poison Powder can miss, and Shellder doesn't really help all that much, but eventually, it takes about 3 minutes, we do knock out Cloth. One thing I have to mention here is that this game is really bad in terms of having options. There is no option to shut off battle animations, and while they are quite good, in a run like this where everything takes a really long time, it would have been really nice to turn them off. It makes no sense why you wouldn't just allow them to be turned off, but what do I know? Anyway, that's one battle out of 18. Next, we're going to go battle our first gym leader, Katie. And here's where you're going to start to see a strategy that I want to use going forward. Key to this strategy is another Pokemon available in Gen 2, Wooper. But not normal Wooper, Paldean Wooper evolved into Clodsire. Because Clodsire can learn lots of really useful moves, including Toxic Spikes, Spikes, and Stealth Rocks. Now, my Clodsire has the ability Poison Point, which will poison Pokemon, but the goal is, and this is what takes so long, for me to set up all these entry hazards, but usually only one layer of Toxic Spikes, and then I'm going to switch into Pokemon such as Arcanine. Now, why specifically Arcanine? Because it's one of the only Pokemon in the early game that can learn Roar. Roar is a TM in the DLC, but this run was performed without DLC, despite the fact I could have gotten it. I decided to play with the base game just because it's something everyone has, and I want to play the DLC for a different reason. Anywho, Arcanine then uses Roar, and when a Pokemon comes in, the way entry hazards work is as long as they're not holding the heavy-duty boots, which nothing in this game except for one Pokemon at the end has a held item. This is also something that's very disappointing because it would make the game a lot more interesting if there was just an option for a I don't know, slightly more difficult mode, but because nothing holds items, I can explain how all the entry hazards work. So we can start with Stealth Rocks. So typically, Stealth Rocks will take away 1/8 of a Pokemon's total health every time they swap in. However, if the Pokemon is weak to Rock, like a Flying type, it'll take away 1/4, and if it's double weak to Rock, like Volcarona or Snom or something, it takes away 50%. However, the same thing is true if a Pokemon resists Stealth Rocks. So rather than 1/8, it'll take away 1/16, or just 1 out of 32 if it's double resisted. We can stack that with Spikes, which can be layered up to 3 times. 1 layer deals 1/8, 2 layers deal 1/6, and a maximum of 3 layers of Spikes actually takes away 1/4 of the opponent's health, and it doesn't depend on type in terms of damage. However, if it's a levitating or flying Pokemon, then Spikes doesn't affect it at all. Finally, Toxic Spikes will poison any Pokemon that switches in, so long as they are not levitating or flying type. However, if a poison Pokemon swaps in, then Toxic Spikes is gotten rid of. So the strategy is to swap in a Pokemon like Arcanine, which can roar, causing the Pokemon to swap out and swap in again and again and again to quickly defeat opponents, but we can put quickly in big old air quotes. Against Katie, this works okay. However, Roar cannot force a Pokemon to swap out if it's the last Pokemon. So for Teddiursa, we just simply had to wait till Teddiursa fainted. There will be an item I can acquire that will make this much quicker, or at least a little quicker, but I didn't have it quite yet. So that's how I got the first gym badge, and frankly how I hope to get all of them, although I don't think the strategy will work as well as the game goes on, but we'll see. The next gym leader I decided to fight was Brassius. Now, you should note that the gym leaders don't scale in level. There is an intended order, and right now I have done the intended order. Brassius, thankfully, doesn't have any poison Pokemon, and is going to be hopefully very, very similar to Katie. The goal is to get the entry hazards up, roar, and try to deal as much damage as possible. Thankfully, because Arcanine is fire type, it resists both Brassius and Katie's strongest attacks. Thus far, against the gyms, Clodsire and Arcanine have been important, but I do have some other Pokemon that I can use, like Ghastly and Weasel. I don't really need either of them too much right now. They're more for later on in case something happens, but I swap them in just to get them a little bit of experience points. But yeah, Brassius slowly but surely faints to poison damage, and that's 2 gyms down. Next comes the electric gym leader, Iono, and Clodsire should be pretty good against this gym leader, considering that Clodsire is, well, I don't know, ground type. However, Wattrel does know Pluck, and while Clodsire has really good special defense, its defense leaves a lot to be desired, and so it gets knocked out a little bit before I would have liked it to. But it's not a huge deal. Arcanine comes in, and after tanking a Spark, roars the Wattrel out for Bellabolt, which is a pretty tanky Pokemon. So you can see the order in which I do things is the order they happen in. So Bellabolt gets hit by Stealth Rock, it gets poisoned, and then hit by Spikes. Also, Bellabolt deals a ton of damage to Arcanine, leaving it at only 31 health for Mismagus, which terastallizes into the electric type. But it's not affected by Spikes because, well, it has Levitate, and Arcanine is knocked out. So this is the first time we're going to have to resort to another strategy to finish off the battle. Thankfully, we still do have Skiploom, and we can terastallize it in order to make the electric attacks neutral. Unfortunately, we get confused, and that makes things a little bit more annoying, but confusion in this generation is only a 1 in 3 chance. Next, the strategy is as you saw against Cloth. We're back to Poison and Leech Seed, but unfortunately, Skiploom starts to get pretty low on health. Thankfully, I do have Synthesis, which works fairly well, as long as there's no rain or sandstorm or anything. I only have 5 power points, so I decide to switch in Weasel, and Hex knocks it out immediately. But Vivillon's able to come out, and Vivillon is kind of interesting, because Vivillon actually learns Protect. And with Protect, I can stall the Mismagus and have it faint. Then Wattrel comes out, and faints immediately due to the Stealth Rocks, and that leaves just Luxio remaining. Thankfully, it doesn't have Guts, it's an Intimidate Pokemon, and we can swap back into Skiploom, and slowly but surely, with status effects and Leech Seed, we're able to knock out Luxio. So realistically in this battle, it was Arcanine, Clodsire played a huge role, and Skiploom really took center stage. Alright, now it's time to try and defeat our first Team Star member, Mila. So the thing with Team Star is before you can actually fight the leader, you have to do this really annoying mini-game, basically. In Scarlet and Violet, you can send out Pokemon to auto-battle wild Pokemon. This is not what I've used to level up. What I used to level up is catching a lot of Pokemon, and I mean a lot of Pokemon, different Pokemon in fact. Maybe filling up the Pokedex, we'll see. But anywho, whether you consider this pacifist or not is up to you. To me, I'm not using an attacking move in battle. That was the criteria, but clearly the Pokemon are attacking. So if you want to say this isn't pacifist, fine. You can't beat the whole game. You would just be able to defeat the Titans. And frankly, most Pokemon games end with defeating the champion anyway. For me, however, I'm perfectly happy saying that this isn't using an attacking move. In fact, I'm not really battling at all. I don't know what's really going on because there's no animations or anything. And frankly, it just feels like a cheap way to say this is impossible because, again, just ignore Team Star if you really think this violates a pacifist run. But let me tell you, I think you'll be glad that I did do Team Star because I found out some very, very interesting things about these Team Star battles that legitimately made me question whether pacifist could be possible at all in this game. Why? Well, let's take a look. I'm actually gonna skip ahead a little bit in this battle. Mila has two Pokemon, including Torkoal. Here's a key important thing. Roar doesn't seem to work in these battles. I don't know if that's because Roar doesn't work at all, or if Roar can't roar in the car. I honestly didn't end up even trying to use Roar strats because, well, to be honest, it was nice to have to try something different. But eventually Torkoal faints. That's not what's interesting. So let's just fast forward this. Now out comes Revavroom. At first, things seem to be fairly normal. Well, sort of. It took Stealth Rocks damage, but it didn't seem to be affected by Toxic Spikes. And that was confusing because I thought that the Revavroom, or at least these ones, were just the primary type. Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit more into the battle, like 4 minutes more. Jumpluff is out, and I go for Leech Seed, and it doesn't affect the opposing Revavroom. At this point, I wasn't really sure what was going on, and I really just thought it missed. I didn't pick up on that. But notice that the Revavroom has not taken any damage outside of the initial Stealth Rock damage. It is completely the same. So for the first time, I'm defeated. But of course, I can just battle Mila again, right? Not a big deal. Now, in that losing battle, what I wanted to do was swap in my Haunter and use Curse, but Haunter fainted before it could do so. However, I learned something pretty disturbing. After being hit with Blazing Torque, Haunter seems unable to use Curse. Now, if you remember Gold and Silver and every other generation, Ghost Pokemon love to cause themselves to faint by using Curse. So something's wrong here. At this point, I started to put something together that would be spelled out explicitly for me online. And it's bad. So let me explain as I go and defeat Torkoal for like the third time. You see, what I found out is that these Revavroom can't be damaged by many things that aren't actual attacks, which wouldn't really matter to anyone who wasn't trying to do a pacifist run, an incredibly niche run. But yes. So here's the deal. These aren't really Revavroom, they're Starmobiles, and they do have the primary type. So they would normally be affected by Toxic Spikes if they could be statused, which they can't. They also can't be affected by Leech Seed. They also can't be affected by Curse. So what does that leave me? Well, entry hazards work on them other than Toxic Spikes, so we definitely need to set those up to deal a bunch of damage. But the only way to damage these Starmobiles that I could think of is something I really didn't want to have to resort to, and that was Sandstorm. As you may have noticed, a teeny tiny bit of health was subtracted due to Sandstorm. So basically what I need to do against this Starmobile is to wait for Sandstorm to slowly knock it out. That's literally the only way to damage it. Other Starmobiles, there is a second option I figured out would work, but this Starmobile, the only thing I could think of that would deal indirect damage to it, other than the entry hazards, is Sandstorm. And holy mackerel, does it take a really, I don't know how fast, AJ, put how fast you're fast forwarding it. I have no idea, but like, you have no idea how long this took. You'll notice I'm using some different Pokemon here, like Dreadnought, Silcobra, because it has Sand Spit ability. Every time it gets hit, it uses Sandstorm, which is quite nice. I'm using Arcanine because Blazing Torque can't affect it, and Dreadnought because its Rock Water typing makes it double resist. Although, I probably should have used the Caracol. I ended up having better stats on Dreadnought, but it got burned, which Caracol wouldn't have been. So it was a slight mistake, but thankfully, while it was actually pretty close, Marini, the Pokemon that actually ended up starting my career, no joke, go look at it. That was the first video of mine to ever actually reach a larger audience with Recover, was able to slowly but surely stall out the Shedder Starmobile. And after how many minutes did this take? 15 minutes. I want to put that in perspective. In Generation 1, I played increased speed. 15 minutes for some of these Pokemon is a third or a quarter of the entire run. Just this one battle took 15 minutes. And you saw, well, an accelerated version of that. Anywho, that is another major battle done. So we're kind of a third of the way done. Well, we're close. We're 5 out of 18. So let's go get another battle done. Now, the Titans let you traverse the world easier, so I did another one, Bombardier or Bombardier, or however you want to pronounce it. But a Pokemon you're going to see me use is Grimer. Why? Because Grimer learns Toxic at a very low level, and Toxic is way faster than Poison Powder and Leech Life. Also in this battle, you will see the debut of an item that makes this run way faster, the Rocky Helmet. Now, Rocky Helmet doesn't always work. It needs to be a move that deals contact damage, which is typically a physical move, but a couple special moves actually do deal contact damage, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but whatever. But it takes away 1/6 of, I don't know if it affects Titans the same way, but ordinarily it's 1/6 of their overall health. You stack that with Toxic, and we have a pretty quick battle. In fact, I'm curious how long this takes, and thankfully, with a poison Pokemon using Toxic, it can't miss. Don't also forget, we actually have a Pokemon helping us in the second phase, and it takes all of just under 2 minutes, which isn't bad. And I just had to use 2 Pokemon, Grimer and then Arcanine with Rocky Helmet. In theory, we could have used Curse or Jumpluff, but Jumpluff is weak to flying. Anyway, it was fast enough. So that is 6 battles down. Against Orthworm, I had a pretty cool strategy, if I do say so myself. It's Steel type, so you can't poison it, right? Wrong. We can just use Soak. Soak is a move learned by a lot of water Pokemon, and Masquerain, a former water Pokemon, well, at least its pre-evolved form was, and that turns Orthworm into a water type. And as a water type, it can be toxic. And since it can be toxic, it can be knocked out quickly. Now, for whatever reason, I opted not to use Soak strats the second time around. I don't know why I did, because it took a really, really long time to knock out Orthworm, but it was still fairly quick. So, other than Mila, so far, every single trainer has been a first try victory, which, just taking a bit of a break here before the halfway point, it makes a degree of sense because while the AI is better than Gen 2, we do have a lot more interesting options. I mean, we had every entry hazard before the first gym. Generally speaking, the runs are difficult at the beginning because you don't have options, and difficult at the end because the levels become a little extreme. Thus far, everything has been, well, I wouldn't say easy. It's been an interesting challenge, but nothing that I haven't been able to figure out on the fly. Alright, so I decided to battle Great Tusk next. I mean, really cool design, by the way. But I can just use Toxic right off the bat and then stall it. Masquerain does have Intimidate, which kind of helps, and it went down pretty easily. Skipping ahead to the second part, we have Scovillain helping us out, which didn't really help us out all that much. Honestly, I just don't have a lot to say about this one. You've already kind of seen the strategy for all the Titans, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Not that there's many Titans left, there's just Dondozo / Tatsugiri left, the final Titan which lets you climb walls. Otherwise, we've defeated almost all the Titans, which is great because that means we can have pretty much free access to almost anywhere we want in the overworld. The next thing I decided to do is to defeat the 4th gym leader, Kofu, and his water Pokemon. He leads with Veluza, which is really bad because Veluza is actually part Psychic, so both of its types are bad for Clodsire, a ground poison type. So that means we gotta be kinda quick here. Veluza goes for Aqua Cutter, which pretty much knocks out Clodsire instantly. I go for Stealth Rocks, and that's all we're gonna be able to do. There is a Sandstorm that was just naturally occurring. This can happen, which is kinda nice because it does a bit of damage, but we had to switch our strategy a bit. So I'm going to use Quillfish because Quillfish has access to spikes, and seeing as it is a water Pokemon, Veluza can't hurt it since it doesn't actually know a psychic move. We get out a couple layers of spikes, unfortunately not all 3, before Veluza is able to knock out Quillfish. And we can't use Arcanine here because, well, Arcanine is in fact a fire Pokemon. This may surprise you. What I can do is use Masquerain, Masquerain getting a lot of use, with Whirlwind, which works the exact same way as Roar does. Now out comes the Crabominable, and Crabominable thankfully doesn't actually have an ice move, but not so thankfully it deals a ton of damage with Crabhammer and knocks me out. And that means I only have 3 Pokemon left. Jumpluff, which has my Rocky Helmet, and if this knows an ice move, I'm done, but it doesn't seem to, which is kind of really lucky, because Slam sucks, which is what it went for. Anywho, I end up using Leech Seed and Synthesis, but because there is an invisible Sandstorm, I am only healing a quarter with Synthesis as opposed to a half, which is really annoying, but I am getting 1/16 of damage. Veluza comes out next, and this is just a matter of stalling. Pluck is super effective, but don't forget there's Rocky Helmet and Sandstorm, and with Synthesis, I am just barely able to knock out Veluza. Something else you might notice is it keeps asking me to swap. Set mode, not a thing. So we're gonna just have to manually press B every time. Wugtrio, Water Dugtrio, comes out next, and it's a pretty good Pokemon. But once I get up Leech Seed, I think it's over. It hits with Headbutt, but unfortunately because of Sandstorm, Jumpluff faints. Now out comes Haunter. It goes for Water Pulse, which is not a very good move on a physical attacking Wugtrio. I hit it with Curse, and now the combination of Leech Seed, Curse, and the Sandstorm is too much for Wugtrio. Water Pulse doesn't deal nearly enough damage, and even though it does knock out Haunter, because I do have 1 Pokemon remaining, I win with no Pokemon on the battlefield, which is weird because I think an animation is supposed to play where the Pokemon celebrates, but there's nothing out there. But it's a pacifist run. That actually is pretty much what I'd expect. So that was definitely a harder battle, and it goes to show you the Entry Hazard's Roar strats are not perfect. They worked so well the first few gyms because we had good type matchups, but with bad type matchups, and since Clodsire is really the linchpin of everything, we had to alter our strategy some. But realistically, we've so far for gym leaders used 2 streams of strategy. Entry Hazard Roar, and then status Leech Seed type stuff, stall. So will there ever be another strat? Well, frankly, it's Pacifist. There's only so many things you can do, but probably we'll have to improvise once again. Now, I forgot to battle Giacomo, or Giacomo as I called him in my first video since I'd never seen that name before. And I have a really fun strategy. The first Pokemon is Bisharp, and thankfully it does do contact damage, so we can knock it out pretty quick with Jumpluff and Rocky Helmet. But here's the fun thing. Here is the Starmobile, and we can use Hippopotas, but watch this fun strategy. So, Haunter here has the Black Sludge. Black Sludge is a really cool item. On poison Pokemon, it basically acts as a leftovers. But let me ask you this. What happens if, I don't know, we give it to something that wasn't meant to hold Black Sludge, like a dark type Starmobile? Well then, even though this thing can't be status or damaged by almost anything, guess what? It is damaged by Black Sludge, and it actually is damaged quite a bit. And this is going to speed up the battle exponentially. Now, I messed up by not putting out entry hazards because I had the wrong team, and that was just simply a matter of me trying to catch things and just having things in the wrong order. But in case you want to know how much quicker this battle was, it was just over 8 minutes long, which is absurd, but it was half the length of the previous battle. So a win's a win. One thing that does suck is Giacomo or Mila, their Starmobiles don't know any moves that deal contact damage, because we can use Rocky Helmet to add a third layer of damage. Sandstorm, and you'll notice I use Hippopotas. Hippopotas has Sandstream, so it will just, especially if you have the Smooth Rock, or you can give it a Rocky Helmet if you really want, you can swap it in for automatic Sandstorm, trick Black Sludge with Haunter. For the record, I had no idea these things could even be forced to hold items, so that's nice. But yeah, it saved me about 7 minutes, so pretty happy with that, to be honest with you. Alrighty, so now we're gonna go battle Larry, the 5th gym leader. And this one's going to be, well, the only real annoying thing is that Kamala likes to use Yawn, which means I either need to swap out or go to sleep. Now, on Clodsire, I could give it Rocky Helmet, but I actually opt to go for Black Sludge. Why? Because it's really cheap and it's easy to find, but 2, because I actually think it's more important to keep Clodsire alive than to deal damage, because entry hazards are just so important in these gym battles. Now, once again, we're going to be using Masquerain to use Whirlwind. Although Arcanine is perfectly usable, the Dun 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 Sparse takes a ton of damage and actually ends up statusing Masquerain with Glare, meaning it won't fall asleep. We're able to Whirlwind out into Staraptor, which doesn't get damaged by Toxic Spikes immediately since it's Flying type, but once it terastallizes to Normal type, and if it were to be roared out by, let's say, Arcanine, it would get poisoned the next time. So it's damaged by Rocky Helmet. Kamala can't get poisoned because it's comatose. It goes for Yawn. I just roar it out. Staraptor comes in. It takes a ton of damage. Don't forget, it's only getting damaged now normally because it's not Flying type anymore. So less Rocky Helmet, but that's okay. I have to swap out Arcanine. I don't want it to go to sleep. And Facade, well, it is poisoned. It's Terra Normaled, which gives it basically pseudo adaptability. But with Rocky Helmet, Grimer actually does a good job and knocks it out. Now out comes Haunter. We can just go for Curse here, but instead I decide to swap Black Sludge because I thought it would be funny. Kamala is insistent on going for Sucker Punch because I'm a Ghost type Pokemon, and then the Dun 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 Sparse comes out, almost gets knocked out. Think about it like this, assuming a Pokemon is neutral, Spikes if you get 3 layers is 25%, plus 12.5%, that's 37%, plus it gets damaged immediately from poison. So that's practically, for a grounded Pokemon, 50% damage just under every time it comes out. And if a Sandstorm is there, that means only 1 Roar is needed before the Pokemon faints. However, if it swaps in not via Roar, the poison doesn't hit until the end of its turn. So you want it to come out via Roar. Anyway, this was a really quick and really easy battle. You can see that some of the peripheral Pokemon are changing, but thus far, Jumpluff, Arcanine, and Clodsire have been super important, with Masquerain being a little important recently, but I have bad news for you Masquerain fans. I don't know if I'm going to use it much longer, because The more gym leaders we beat, the higher level Pokemon we can catch. The higher level Pokemon we catch, the more options we have for team members. And I'm not even necessarily using the most optimal team right now. I'm just using Pokemon I like and Pokemon that kind of work. But there's some Pokemon coming up that could really help us out. And help us out they might need to do, because the 6th gym leader is a double battle that's very tough, and her name is Rhyme. Now, since Rhyme is a double battle, the entry hazards aren't going to be as important. In single battles, you can't use Roar after 3 of 4 Pokemon faint, but in double battles, after just 2 faint, Roar can't be used anymore. And you can only roar 1 Pokemon at a time. I'm still going to use entry hazards. I'm also going to use Muck. Muck isn't the best poison Pokemon to use. There are some better ones I could be using, but like I said, it learns Toxic early, and I have it on the team, as do I have Clodsire. So we're using Toxic on the Pokemon that are out there, and we're setting up the entry hazards. And then we swap in Mabostiff. Now, I wish this Mabostiff had Intimidate. That would have been nice. Its ability it does have is completely useless, but I didn't notice until I started using it, and then I got attached. Now, Mabostiff is Dark type, which is nice. It has Rocky Helmet, which is really nice, although I gave it that. And it knows Roar, which is why I'm using it. So Mabostiff can roar in the Toxtricity, which will Terrastalize into the Ghost type. And now the trick is to just stall. Roar Pokemon out. This time it's going to roar out Toxtricity. The Mimikyu will hopefully faint to Toxic, which it does. The Banette gets damaged, and then Houndstone comes out. So we're actually doing a pretty good job. Mabostiff lasts a pretty long time, considering I barely trained this Pokemon. And now we can start using Leech Seed. And don't forget, we have Rocky Helmet on more Pokemon now. They're 50,000 Pokédollars, but we have way more money. We can swap Muck back in just because Muck's pretty bulky, it's pretty useful. And at the end of the day, thanks to Leech Seed, thanks to the entry hazards, and thanks to Jumpluff, although it unfortunately does faint, we are able to eventually, once we switch in Hippowdon, because Hippopotas, while great, isn't as good as a fully evolved Hippowdon, we're able to win. It took a while, it was a long battle, and we lost a bunch of Pokemon, but at the end of the day, we had a pretty good matchup versus Rhyme, and even though our strategy had to be modified a little bit, it still worked better than I thought it would for a double battle, and that means we've defeated 6 of the 8 gyms, 2 of 5 Team Star, and all but 1 Titan. Oh, and would you look at that, we have defeated the final Titan. Dondozo takes a really long time because it's 3 parts instead of 2, but unfortunately for entertainment's sake, there's really not much to say about these battles. These Titans are really kind of easy in the context of a Pacifist run. There's really not much puzzle solving or anything we need to do. Wild Pokemon don't really have good AI. I'm not sure if in the future, if I do more runs in Scarlet and Violet, I'll even include them, but for completion's sake, here are all 5 Titans defeated. Sorry everything went so quickly, but you know, Pacifist animations on takes a long time. Okay, so we have 1 quest pretty much wrapped up. Now we just have to battle Arven, but I'll do that at the end once I finish the other 2 quests. So which quest should we wrap up next? Well, I decide let's go and get another badge. So Grusha leads with Frostmoth, which is not a great matchup for Clodsire, but Clodsire does have really good special defense. Thankfully, Frostmoth goes for Tailwind the first turn, so I set up Spikes, and then the second turn, it goes for Blizzard, and wow, that did a lot of damage. I mean, my special defense must not be that great. So, oh no Stealth Rocks. Wrong. Remember I talked about Caracal? Well, it's now a Colossal, and it's Fire type and Rock type, and it knows Stealth Rocks. And it's a pretty good Pokemon to match up against Grusha, as is Arcanine, which is going to start doing the roaring thing. Unfortunately, by this point, gym leaders actually have decent moves. They're not just monotype, and so Beartic uses Earthquake and does a ton of damage. I'm still able to roar in Frostmoth, which because it's Ice and Bug, takes a huge amount of damage from the entry hazards. But now I gotta decide who I want to send out next. And I don't actually have another Pokemon to roar other than Mabostiff. And Mabostiff, well, it's not really going to have a great matchup against Frostmoth. But thankfully, I can swap it in here since the Tailwind petered out. I predicted accurately it would go for Tail Whip, And now I have another Pokemon to use Roar as Beartic comes out again. It's hurt by the spikes, and it's almost knocked out, but not quite. So I'm just going to go for Roar here. It goes for Icicle Crash, and it does a lot of damage. Over half. Unfortunately, I get the really unclutch flinch, and it doesn't quite faint. I have Salazzle, which doesn't know Toxic yet. It doesn't learn it till really late, but it is a fire Pokemon, and it does have Poison Gas. It doesn't have great defenses, though. So it deals about a half to me with Icicle Crash. This one might be a loss. Titan comes out, and I'm just going to swap in Muck. Thankfully, Titan goes for Liquidation, which doesn't do all that much to Muck, and I do have Rocky Helmet. Now the Tailwind peters out, it goes for Ice Spinner, which does quite a lot more to Muck, but thankfully, Titan will be knocked out. Wait, no, it won't be. Ooh, that's really bad. But I had a solution. I used Acid Armor to sharply raise my defense, just in case, and then Ice Spinner doesn't knock me out, giving Muck one more hit. Hopefully, one more opportunity to hopefully be hit by a physical attack, but Altaria is very unlikely to do that, and Muck gets knocked out by Hurricane. Now out comes Salazzle. So Salazzle has a few options. I decide to go for Poison Gas. It's not quite toxic, but it's the best I have, and unfortunately Hurricane knocks out the Salazzle. And we may lose here. Mabosstiff comes out next, and I'm really thinking I should have taught Protect, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to swap into Caracol, hoping for a Hurricane. I get the Hurricane, but Caracol avoids the attack. Now, I don't know what exactly the Altaria is going to do. So I go for Tar Shot, which is going to lower its speed. It goes for Dragon Pulse. I survive on just 21 HP. And then Tar Shot lowers the speed of Altaria. I don't know if that's going to matter, but I had to use a status move, and it just was more useful than anything else I had. It goes for Dragon Pulse and knocks out the Caracol. And now all I have left is Mabosstiff. Thanks to Tar Shot, I outspeed, and I have one opportunity to win. I need to hit with Swagger, and I need Swagger to work. There is only a 1 in 3 chance Altaria hits itself in confusion. And, well, I get it. And not only do I get it, it deals just enough damage, and I mean just enough damage, for the Poison Gas poison to knock out Altaria. So, it was close. Every single Pokemon needed to serve a role. But in the end of the day, we actually were able to first try our 7th consecutive gym leader. I'm actually really happy about this one. This one makes me smile. All right. Now we have 3 Team Star members left and 1 gym. So let's go get to those. Now, I kind of messed up and battled Aerie next. She is the fighting type Team Star member, and I was a little underleveled to beat her. So I lead with Jumpluff. Now this might be a little confusing, but there is a strategy here. I actually lost twice, but mostly because I was underleveled, so I had to get to the proper level here. I'm level 54 now. I think I was 45 when I first battled her. So I need to put the Toxicroak to sleep because I do want to swap in Clodsire. Now the reason is that the entry hazards are actually more pivotal in this battle than you might think. Even though we can't use Roar, the car is so powerful and it takes so many turns to knock it out. The best way to deal a lot of damage quickly are with entry hazards. It may surprise you, but if you don't set up with Jumpluff first, the Toxicroak actually will knock out Clodsire quickly. Well, not quickly, but quickly enough that I actually don't set up all the entry hazards I need. So we knock it out here, and next comes out Annihilate. We need to knock out these Pokemon too, obviously, and they're no slouches either. So for Annihilate, we swap in Skuntank. Now the thing with Skuntank is it can tank an Ice Punch, which Annihilate has. It also has the Aftermath ability. So if it gets knocked out by a physical move, then Skuntank will take out a quarter of the opponent's health, or an eighth of the Revavroom's health, as I discovered. Now, we Terrastalize to Poison type, which is again lucky, because Annihilate goes for close combat, which is resisted by poison. And now I can swap Skuntank into Spiritomb. The timing doesn't quite work out for Annihilate to get knocked out, so I have to swap something else in, and I opt to swap back in Clodsire, and Rage Fist doesn't actually do all that much to me. Well, it does a lot, but not enough to be worried about. Next comes out Lucario, which is a special attacker. And I'm going to send out Jumpluff because since Lucario is Steel type, the best way of dealing with it, unfortunately I miss, and this happens with Leech Seed, is to use Leech Seed strats, which is really, really annoying, but it's just what you have to do. So Jumpluff will stay in the entire time versus Lucario, well, almost the entire time. When it's about to get knocked out, I swap into Spiritomb, but unfortunately I swap in a little too early, and that ruined the strategy I was going to do. So I swap Jumpluff back in. That's okay. Simeon now comes out. Simeon is poisoned. Now, if I didn't Terrastalize before, I would have Terrastalized here because Rock Tomb is coming. Now we can safely switch into Hippowdon, which we want it to have a lot of health. We can also use Jumpluff for Rocky Helmet, and I really wanted it to survive. And would you look at that, on 4 HP it did. So it can't do much versus Revavroom other than it's a Rocky Helmet attack. I'm going to swap in, I got to think about that. I swap in Skuntank here, but there is a chance it goes for its Torque move. Thankfully, it goes for Spin Out, which is great. Not only does it lower its speed, oh, it doesn't knock out Skuntank, but that actually could be better if it goes for it again. It sharply lowered speed and Rocky Helmet, and it goes for high horsepower, which I forgot it had, which is also a contact damage move. And see how much that Aftermath did? Beautiful, perfect. And Rocky Helmet, so it's at half HP, which is excellent. Now we have Haunter, we're going to use Trick, and now we have the Sandstorm, we have the Black Sludge, and we have Rocky Helmet. Unfortunately, it can start going for its Torque move, which doesn't deal contact damage, but what we can do to avoid that is to swap in a Ghost Pokemon like Spiritomb, then get Jumpluff to deal a bit more damage via Rocky Helmet, and then we just have to put Hippowdon. It likes to go for Shift Gear because, well, it doesn't want to be slow, but thankfully it is too little, too late, and after 3 failed attempts, we were able to defeat Aerie, and you can see that Aerie was no slouch. Her Pokemon are actually quite good. The previous 2 Team Star members, we didn't really even think about the Pokemon that came out before the car. So that's 3 down, 1 easy member to go because I messed up the order, and then we have 1 very difficult member as well as a gym leader. Alright, Atticus is Poison type, which isn't very good for him, or for me because Toxic Spikes is a really easy way to damage. There are 4 Pokemon including the car, but we're going to be able to set up easily on Skuntank, which is pretty nice. It keeps trying to go for Sucker Punch. Then we can send out my Skuntank. The goal here is just to get this part done as quick as possible. So we're going to go into Haunter, and I'm going to use Curse to just speed things up a little bit. This proved to be very costly later on. We can also go for Spite to try and lower its power points and just stall out a little time. Again, this didn't really work all too well and was a pretty big mistake. You'll see what I mean. Now an actual Revavroom comes out, and unfortunately what happens here is I go for Curse, and I was greedy there. Revavroom went for Bulldoze, and that means we can't equip Black Sludge to the Starmobile, so this is going to take an incredibly, incredibly long time. We go for Curse on Spiritomb, Muck comes out, we put it to sleep, we use Leech Seed. We're just stalling till Muck gets knocked out, and now, thankfully, this Revavroom does have Spin Out, so we just kind of have to hope it goes for either Flame Charge or Spin Out, and then gets hit with Rocky Helmet damage, which it actually is doing. I'm actually just keeping Hippowdon in because it doesn't seem to want to go for its Torque move because Hippowdon is ground type and it would be not very effective. And so this battle actually doesn't take nearly as long as it could have. If we had the Black Sludge, it would have been even quicker. But this was one of the quickest battles so far, although we were hilariously over-leveled, which doesn't matter so much in a Pacifist run, but mattered a little bit here. I'll be honest, it did. Alright, Ortega is the Fairy-type Team Star member, but I didn't realize he led off with Azumarill, which Typically bad for a Pokemon like Clodsire, but it used Charm, which was interesting. And long story short, turns out this Azumarill doesn't actually know a water move, which is really annoying. So I actually spent a lot of time figuring that out and trying to put it to sleep and get out Clodsire and set everything up. It just took a really long time. Really unfortunate. I don't usually like to look up movesets for a newer game because it is kind of fun to have mystery. But this was literally the battle where I decided, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. This just takes too long. So eventually Azumarill faints, out comes Wigglytuff, and I'm still trying to set stuff up. Unfortunately, I misclick and set up 3 layers of Toxic Spikes. I did want 2 layers just to speed up the rest of the Pokemon, but I don't set up any layers of spikes, which is going to make the Starmobile a lot longer since that's, what, like 25% or so? I don't know exactly how much it does because the HP bar looks very weird on it. Anyway, I have to slowly knock out the Wigglytuff and the Dash Bun, but thankfully I'm able to do so, and Jumpluff is even able to survive. Revavroom comes out next, and it can't get poisoned, so Leech Seed or bust there. Haunter comes out, and unfortunately for me, I actually get outsped by the Starmobile. I was stunned by that, and things ended up getting really bad. So I have to switch in Hippowdon, because that's the only way I'm now going to deal any meaningful damage to this thing. Now I'm trying to Terrastalize and get it to actually hit my Pokemon with Rocky Helmet with a contact move. And for whatever reason, it keeps going for Magical Torque, despite the fact it's not very effective against my Terrastalized Skuntank. So it looks like I'm going to lose here. Magical Torque does nothing to Salazzle because I am both Fire and Poison type. So the hope was that I could end up swapping in Salazzle, get it to use Spin Out, and then swap in Hippowdon. Unfortunately, it still wanted to go for Magical Torque. Just nothing would stop it. And I thought all was lost, but for whatever reason, against Skuntank, it went for Spin Out. And after Rocky Helmet and Aftermath, we were at half HP, so things were looking okay. But now I only have 2 Pokemon in reserve. So it goes for Confuse Ray. I do have Rest on my Hippowdon, so I can gain more HP. Unfortunately, as I swap in Jumpluff to go for Synthesis, Magical Torque crits and knocks it out. So now I have 2 Pokemon, but something kind of amazing happens. I'm actually able to start manipulating the AI to do what I want it to do. Well, not immediately, but after a while, it does start to use Spin Out against Hippowdon, and it starts to use Magical Torque and Confuse Ray against Salazzle. But the HP is slowly lowering down, and it's going to be really close. Eventually, the Sandstorm dies on just a sliver of health. I needed Salazzle to tank the hit, which it did, and that allows me to swap back in Hippowdon. I get knocked out by Magical Torque, but that's okay because the Sandstorm was able to do damage. Man, Black Sludge again, 0 for 2 on our last 2, and this is the last time we had to use it. Once again, I am standing there without any Pokemon, but we beat Ortega, and there's only 1 gym leader left. The Psychic type gym leader. We're going to have to change up our team quite a bit because our team is, well, frankly, setting up for Fairy is kind of the opposite of setting up for Psychic, although Steel is useful for both. Shockingly, it has been Team Star that has been the hardest part of this challenge, but we're getting to the hardest trainers in the entire game, so maybe that'll change. Now, you might be wondering, how exactly am I going to use Clodsire against a Psychic type trainer? The answer is I'm not. We can catch Fortress, and Fortress, I hate to say this, is just kind of better than Clodsire. Steel is a way better defensive type. I don't have enough money right now for leftovers, so I just don't have an item against it, but Farigiraf can't really do anything versus me, so I'm able to set up absolutely everything I want to and switch into Hippowdon. Now, Hippowdon, this may surprise you, can learn Roar, making it useful not just for Team Star, but actually useful for the gyms. It's also a fairly tanky Pokemon, but Gardevoir is able to knock it out. So, Energy Ball, what are you going to do? Mabostiff is a dark type Pokemon, but Gardevoir has Dazzling Gleam, almost knocks it out, and I'm able to roar in the Espathra. Thankfully, the Sandstorm has subsided. That gives me an extra turn of poison damage and allows me to swap in Jump Bluff. I don't actually have Arcanine here, so I need to rely on Jump Bluff to knock out Espathra. Now I have my Spiritomb. And oh boy, am I excited to show you what this thing is supposed to do. Unfortunately, it won't be able to do that to Gardevoir. I'll swap in Skunk Tank here, and Dazzling Gleam doesn't do all that much. Next comes out Farigiraf, which is a physical attacker. It also has no more HP left, so yeah. Florges comes out, and Florges is Fairy type, but will Terrasilize into a Psychic type. And I'm going to go for Memento here. Memento causes my Skunk Tank to faint, but decreases Florges' attack and special attack by 2 stages. And since it's the last Pokemon, there's not much you can do. But wait, I can add insult to injury here. And here is a strat Spiritomb can do to make things extra annoying. So what I can do with Spiritomb is I have a Choice Scarf on it. I can use Trick. It has the Pressure ability, which doubles Power Point usage, and then I can use Spite. What that will do is that Florges runs out of Power Points and will knock itself out due to struggle. Now, did I need to do this? No. But it is actually a useful strategy for very annoying Pokemon. And while I haven't used it in any gyms yet, I have used it against Nemona and other random trainers I fought to great effect. And I'm happy I finally got to show it off in a gym. Okay, so I think we can all agree Pacifist has been pretty okay. I mean, everything has pretty much been a first try victory. However, I'm going to tell you, things started to take a turn after we started to do the final battles. The first story I decided to finish was the Team Star story, and that means battling Director Clavel and then Penny, the leader of Team Star. Ooh, what a shock. Now, I wish these battles were shorter, so I could tell you how difficult this battle was and show you all the ways Clavel absolutely just made me look really bad. But I'll have to show you in the winning battle, just because they take so darn long. So Oranguru wasn't that much of a problem. It liked to go for Yawn turn 1, and because it has a really weird moveset, the Spiritomb Choice Scarf strats actually works really well here for Oranguru. We lock it into Foul Play, which allows Fortress, once we have set up the Leech Seed, which is what Jump Bluff was doing in the beginning, we can set up all the various things we need to. So we set up Stealth Rocks, we set up the layers of spikes, we set up the 1 layer of Toxic Spikes, and we try to go for Roar strats. It's always the best thing to do, and thankfully, Oranguru survives just long enough to let me set up everything. Next comes out Gyarados, and this thing is really good. It's only hit by the Stealth Rocks, Intimidate, and the thing with this team is it's a varied team in terms of typing, and all the Pokemon have great movesets. So Gyarados does have Stone Edge. Here it's going to go for Aqua Tail. Does pretty decent damage. I have to Terrasilize here because, as we talked about, it's going to go for Stone Edge. Of course, the time I show you the battle, it misses. It doesn't miss the second time, and you can see how much damage it did. That's not super effective. That's just how much Stone Edge does to my Jump Bluff. So now we need to stall this out a little bit. So even though we have all the hazards set up, getting a Pokemon to swap into this Gyarados is really, really difficult. We can put it to sleep, but that is a bit of a risky proposition. I then swap into Mabostiff, and I'm unable to keep Gyarados asleep. And so it's able to get off Aqua Tail. There was a 1 in 2 chance it stayed asleep there. And Roar is going to fail because it actually just knocks itself out, or the Rocky Helmet does. Next comes out Abomasnow. Abomasnow takes a ton of damage. I'm going to try to go for Roar, but it's just going to go for Woodhammer. And I mean, recoil damage, Rocky Helmet, poison damage, that's a lot of damage, but still no opening to use Roar. See, when a good trainer battles you, it's really hard to just use Roar every 5 seconds. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into Hippowdon because it's going to go for Blizzard. That's going to do, well, actually it did quite a bit. All in all, Fortress is still doing fine and Abomasnow gets knocked out. Now we're going to get Poltegeist, which is actually a really powerful Pokemon. So I'm going to go for Protect. Shadow Ball, I believe, can knock out Fortress from this amount of HP. It might still be able to knock it out. I'm just going to go for double Toxic Spikes in case I survive. But as I said, I don't. Poltegeist, pretty good. And you can see I have Protect now. Next, I'm going to go into Jumpluff. Thankfully, it goes for Will-O-Wisp. Poltegeist isn't knocked out, and due to Sandstorm, Synthesis isn't going to deal all that much. Poltegeist then goes for Shell Smash, but too little, too late, and the poison knocks it out. Next comes out Amoonguss. Amoonguss is annoying because it's going to take away my Toxic Spikes, and that means I'm not going to have it for the most difficult and final Pokemon. But wait, it gets better. I can't use Leech Seed or Poison Powder on this thing. Amoonguss was really hard to try to create strategy around, and I need to use Spiritomb here. Don't forget, we've gotten rid of our Choice Scarf, but we still have Curse. Now, in theory, it could go for Spore and put us to sleep, but in practice, we actually outspeed Amoonguss, and thus we're put to sleep afterwards. And with Curse up, Amoonguss is able to knock out Spiritomb, but we're able to get out Hippowdon. It tries to go for Spore. I have a burned Pokemon, which I wasn't intending to have, but ended up being a perfect defense against Spore, although being Grass type is also a perfect defense against Spore. And now we have one more Pokemon left, the Skeledirge. So Skeledirge knows Torch Song, and like we talked about, the Toxic Spikes, they're gone. So we need a way to damage this. We can swap into Arcanine and just absorb Torch Song, but that doesn't help that much. The Sandstorm's the only thing that just did a little bit of damage. Now it's going to have to go for a different attack, and wouldn't you know, it has Earth Power, which I know. Unfortunately, since we've Terastallized, that will hit Jumpluff, but it will hit for not very effective damage. Now is a moment of truth, and I've lost here before, because we absolutely need Leech Seed to hit. I decide to get even riskier and go for Sleep Powder, just in case. I don't know why I did that. Kinda to save Jumpluff and keep it around. One extra Pokemon is kind of nice, and now we can theoretically go for Synthesis. This was maybe playing it a little bit too safe, because Skeledirge is not going to be able to knock out 3 Pokemon, and by the time it wakes up, I have Arcanine ready for Torch Song. So after 8 losses, it took me 8 losses to figure out this strategy, I'm able to defeat Clavel. The disappointing thing next is that Penny, who's supposed to be more difficult than Clavel, is actually really easy. Because although I love Evolutions, they don't have super varied movesets, and so getting those opportunities to start using Roar and just dealing a ton of damage presented themselves a lot more frequently. Now, one thing I didn't expect is that Dark Pulse did a lot more and flinched. So I had to switch to Jumpluff, put Umbreon to sleep, get Leech Seed, and that will let Fortress, well, actually I have to start using Protect, but eventually that will allow Fortress to start setting up. It was definitely very frustrating and annoying that I got that flinch, and that Dark Pulse does so much to Fortress. This is an example where Clodsire would be better, but going forward, I really think Fortress is our Pokemon, and we are able to set up everything. Now, unsurprisingly, Flareon comes out next, but Flareon is going to go for a Fire move, and Arcanine blocks that pretty easily. Flareon then goes for Baby Doll Eyes, because it really doesn't have anything to do to Arcanine, so I'm able to Roar in Leafeon, which also really can't do anything to Arcanine. I swap into Fortress because I still would like to set up a little bit more. I haven't actually fully finished setting up yet, and once I do, I can swap Arcanine back in, and then I can just keep using Roar. Flareon ends up fainting, Vaporeon comes out, I end up swapping into Fortress just because I don't care about it, and in the end, I can actually stall out Hydro Pump a little bit. I don't really need to stall it all the way because it goes for Baby Doll Eyes against Mabostiff, and another Roar sends in Leafeon, which faints, because like we talked about, it's 50% every single time the Pokemon comes out. I swap in Hippowdon for Jolteon, which can't do really much to it. And then I go for Roar on Jolteon. It brings out the Sylveon. Sylveon will Terastallize, goes for Baby Doll Eyes. Roar in Jolteon. Jolteon faints. Vaporeon then faints. Sylveon survives on just a tiny bit. It does a ton of damage with Moonblast, but not enough. I'm able to knock it out with Poison and Sandstorm, and the battle took 15 minutes. I mean, these battles are really, really long, but it was a fairly easy one. The next battle we're going to do is Arven. Just one guy, and he also was, I hate to say it, really easy. So Arven leads with Greedent, and that means we really don't have to worry about putting it to sleep or anything. Greedent, even with Earthquake, can't do anything really to Fortress. So I can set up fully, and then I can swap in Jumpluff, put Greedent to sleep, swap in Hippowdon, and then just start roaring. Unfortunately, I get paralyzed, which is annoying. Toadscruel comes in. It's a physical attacker for whatever reason, goes for Power Up. I'm able to get Roar. In comes his Mabostiff. It terastallizes, but I'm able to roar it before I knock out. Cloyster comes in. I decide to just let Hippowdon faint, and I decide to go into Mabostiff. Liquidation doesn't do enough. I roar. Mabostiff, at least his Mabostiff, comes in, faints immediately. Garganacl gets roared. Out comes Cloyster, which faints immediately. Garganacl comes in, uses Body Press to knock out Mabostiff. I go into Jumpluff. I Terastallize to avoid a rock-based attack. And then I'm able to actually knock it out with just Leech Seed. Scovillain comes in. It's part Fire type, so I go into Arcanine. Scovillain is hurt by Poison. It uses Zen Headbutt. No Rocky Helmet on Arcanine, but I roar out the Greedent. Remember Greedent? And then it goes for Earthquake. However, it isn't able to knock me out. I roar back in Scovillain. Scovillain is knocked out because it's part Fire type. And then Greedent gets knocked out. Finally, out comes Toadscruel. I go for Protect, and that is the battle. This one took just under 12 minutes, and now all we have left are the Elite Four, the Champion, Nemona, and the secret final battle. Let's go. Alright, so I lead with Fortress. I set up one layer of Toxic Spikes, but I get the special defense drop, so I have to swap into Jumpluff. Now, here's the thing. Jumpluff can get hit by Blizzard here and just immediately faint. Thankfully, I'm able to put Whiscash to sleep, but I'm unable to hit the Leech Seed. It wakes up, and then it avoids both attacks and knocks out Jumpluff. Now, because of that knockout, I was unable to set up properly. And so while I do start using Roar strats and everything is looking great, we're going to fast forward through this whole thing. What ends up happening, and this is the most heartbreaking thing that's happened to me in a very long time, is that we end up in a situation where Dugtrio comes out on just a sliver of HP where I have absolutely no way to damage it. None whatsoever. I meant to go Will-O-Wisp over Sunny Day, and you can see me just staring at my screen, hoping there's some way I can stall out Dugtrio, but there was no way to do it. I tried my best, and here's the worst part. I forgot to save, so I had to just lose to Rika. Do you want to know how long that battle took? 22 minutes. 22 minutes. That's a long time for one battle. Alright, so I battle Rika again, and this one goes a lot better. Basically, this time I lead with Jumpluff and I Terastallize, and even though I do get hit by Blizzard, if I just Terastallize the last battle, since I didn't really use it, I would have been fine since it wasn't double super effective. And this time I'm able to set up pretty much everything I want with Fortress, and that's going to prove pretty useful. Unfortunately, setting up Toxic Spikes doesn't really work because Clodsire is part Poison type. Camerupt, I can swap into Arcanine, and then I actually think it does have a ground move, it just doesn't like to use, so we can kind of swap back and forth. Eventually, I decide to get cheeky and get a Roar with Arcanine. Clodsire comes out early and Terastallizes, meaning it loses its Poison type, which means I can send back in Fortress and get the Toxic Spikes, and that is the battle. If we'd done that last time, Dugtrio would have been poisoned and everything would have been fine. Donphan, we can just stall with Hippowdon. That's the basic strategy for Donphan. Clodsire does even less than Donphan because we have Slack Off, which is a really good move, and that's why Hippowdon is at such a high level, because it doesn't learn Slack Off until really late. And so we just keep roaring with Hippowdon. Eventually we get put to sleep. Spiritomb, I decide to go for Trick. Trick is useful because theoretically, because even if everything goes bad, it will eventually run out of earthquakes. And that's what ends up happening. In the end, Dugtrio knocks itself out due to recoil damage. And once again, we have an incredibly long battle. Not as long, only 15 minutes this time, but at least we have a victory to show for it. The next Elite Four member is Poppy. She's Steel type, so none of our toxic strategies are going to work. If you consider all these strategies toxic, then I'm sorry. But the toxic spike strategy will not work. Alright, so Poppy leads with Copperaja, and I'm going to lead again with Jump Bluff. Unfortunately, I missed with Sleep Powder and it sets up Stealth Rocks, which ends up being kind of a problem. And I decide, you know what? Why invest 20 minutes? If we don't get good luck right away, I'm just going to reset. As I set up, I think it's time to talk about a few things here. Number one is, regrettably, I'm starting to develop a bit of a pattern. This really isn't what happened in the last Pacifist run, and it's kind of surprising because you'd think in a more advanced game, there'd be more strategies, and I have used a bunch, but it does seem like the last few battles we've really leaned into Entry Hazard Roar, and it's worked really effectively. It was really just Clavel where it didn't work, and I think a big reason I'm so hesitant to experiment is because without increased speed, it just takes too long. If you could turn off animations, these battles would probably take half the time, and if Pokemon, like a lot of other RPGs, had a speed up function, I mean, who knows, maybe one day, this would be a lot more bearable. But unfortunately, it is kind of a slog to do. And part of the difficulty was just forcing myself to keep doing these really, really long battles, since a lot of them were going as I expected. Of course, some of them really didn't. Eventually, we're able to get Hippowdon and Roar. Don't forget, Sandstorm can't do anything to steal Pokemon. So the only way we can hurt things is via Rocky Helmet and via the entry hazards. We can't even use Toxic. Now, you might be wondering, why not use Salazzle? Well, I decided, and this is another thing that annoys me, you can actually swap Pokemon with your box. That's not fair. When can you do that versus the Elite Four? But in theory, yeah, I would have used Salazzle here. It could have come in handy, but I don't know. Anyway, I end up fainting to Tinkaton, so Arcanine has to come in. It goes for Stone Edge, and that does a lot of damage, but actually less than you'd think. And so Arcanine can start using Roar strats. You can really see why Leftovers over Rocky Helmet makes sense for a Pokemon like Arcanine. The other thing you should note is that you can teach egg moves in this game by using a Mirror Herb and just having a picnic, which is how I know Morning Sun. And I actually found out Jump Bluff could learn Strength Sap. I didn't know that at the time. If I did, this would have been a very, very different run. Strength Sap would have been incredible. It lowers attack and raises your health by a certain amount. Anywho, Mabostiff ends up coming out after Jump Bluff. We run into a bit of a problem though, where I don't want Mabostiff to faint, so I try going for a Clutch Swagger. It doesn't work, and I am able to knock out Corviknight via Arcanine, but it turns out the Roar strats aren't gonna work. All three of our Roarers are gone. So when Bronzong comes out, we're gonna have to use Spiritomb. Shockingly, Bronzong has no status move, so I just go for Curse. It gets knocked out, and then out comes the Tinkaton. I do Terrastalize to avoid Stone Edge damage, I go for Leech Seed, and then I start using Synthesis. Gigaton Hammer does do a lot of damage, but thanks to Rocky Helmet, and thanks to Leech Seed, we're able to knock it out. I forgot there is still Magneton left, we have to go for Leech Seed here, but Magneton can't really do all that much to me since I am now just pure grass. It has to go for Flash Cannon, which is not so great. And I can even go into Fortress just to stall it out a little bit and win the battle versus Poppy. So this battle did end up going a little differently, mostly due to mistakes by me, and yet nonetheless we still had an easy victory. Now we have to battle Larry, again, but this time he is a flying type trainer. That means spikes are out completely, they won't do anything. All we need are Stealth Rocks, and that's 25% every time we use Roar. Pretty cool. Larry leads with Tropius, and Tropius sets up Harsh Sun. I set up Stealth Rocks, and I'm ready to swap into Arcanine. Tropius goes for Air Slash. It doesn't do all that much. It does have a chance to flinch though, but it doesn't. I roar in Altaria. Again, nothing has heavy duty boots. Leftovers, actually I should have gone for Morning Sun, but I just go for Roar again. We get Staraptor. This one can't terrestrialize. We swap into Fortress. It goes for Brave Bird. Hits itself with Recoil. Goes for Brave Bird again. And you'll notice I have Rocky Helmet on Fortress. I swapped the items around. Just it made more sense. I stall with Spikes. They're not going to do anything. I just wanted Fortress to take out Staraptor, and it did. Next comes out Oricorio, the electric form. I go for Morning Sun. It goes for Keter Dance, which isn't great. That's just going to make me stall a little bit longer. And eventually what I end up doing is going for Roar, and that's going to bring back out Altaria. Altaria goes for Dragon Pulse. I do hit myself in Confusion, which is really annoying, meaning I have to go for Morning Sun. And I start getting damaged a little bit, but it's not doing all that much. And now out comes Flamigo, which is part Fighting type, meaning Stealth Rock's not going to do as much. Hippowdon comes in. Flamigo's the one that terrestrializes to pure Flying, which is actually kind of useful. It goes for Close Combat, gets hit by the Rocky Helmet, and then it goes for Brave Bird, does a ton of damage to me, but with Rocky Helmet and Recoil, it almost did more to itself. And then I go for Slack Off, it goes for Brave Bird again, and then it gets knocked out, which is exactly what I wanted. Oricorio confuses Hippowdon, but I'm able to Roar. Back in comes Altaria, it goes for Ice Beam. I'm able to Slack Off, it goes for Ice Beam, and finally I'm able to Roar back in Oricorio. Oricorio goes for Keter Dance. The glitch happens where Hippowdon disappears. Out comes Tropius. Oh yeah, I forgot about Tropius. I gotta go into Arcanine, and I gotta heal, and then I gotta Roar, and then Altaria faints, and then Flamigo faints, and then Oricorio faints, and now I just gotta get rid of Tropius, which I hate that it's the one remaining, because it's a grass type, but that's where Spiritomb can come in. I even go for Hippowdon, just to make sure Spiritomb has an easy swap in, and there it is. I go for Curse. Curse is going to knock it out, and we win. Alright guys, only one more Elite Four member to go, Hassel the Dragon Trainer. I hope beating him isn't a hassle. Pause for applause. Alrighty, Hassel leads with Noivern. Thankfully Jumpluff is really fast. We put it to sleep, we use Leech Seed, and then we swap into Fortress. I know, you've heard that one before. But it's gonna go a little differently, I promise. Because the thing is, Noivern actually is a pretty strong special attacker, and it can do quite a bit to Fortress. So I have to start using Protect, and it starts trying to go for Super Fang, which is kind of lucky. The AI kind of is broken here. Air Slash would be a far, far better move. And unfortunately for Hassel, because he's not using Air Slash enough, or only using it when I'm using Protect, I'm actually able to keep Fortress around, because between Leftovers and Leech Seed recovery, I think I'm actually slightly net positive on HP on some turns, if not mostly neutral. So yeah, I set up everything I want and Noivern faints. Perfect. Next comes out Dragalge. Now, I knew Dragalge was there, it's why I didn't set up Toxic Spikes. This time it won't terrestrialize, so there's not much to do. I go for Protect, and it goes for Hydro Pump. Unfortunately for me, I'd gone for Protect the turn before and forgotten about it, so that was a definite case of my bad. This time Protect is going to work, and it loses a Hydro Pump. And now I decided to just keep Fortress in, tank Hydro Pump. I actually did have to set up one more layer of Spikes, which is why I kept Fortress in. I thought I'd set up everything, but now finally we've set up everything. We've actually gotten rid of almost all of the Hydro Pumps, and we can swap in our Jumpluff, and I think that's the last one. Now we can swap in Fortress, since it's going to go for Sludge Bomb, and if I did my math correctly, we should be good. And we are. It goes for Thunderbolt, which is a much weaker attack than Hydro Pump. Now we can swap in the Hippowdon, and that means we're going to start doing Sandstorm damage, but more importantly, we're going to start doing our favorite thing. We roar Dragalge, and out comes Baxcalibur. Baxcalibur starts as Ice Dragon, and now it's going to terrestrialize into Pure Dragon. I'm going to swap in Fortress because it's going to go for probably Icicle Crash, and I was correct, eventually. It goes for Icicle Crash, doesn't do that much. Sandstorm does a little bit. Now, it's going to go for Glavin Rush here, or Glavine Rush. So what I do is just use Protect. It only has 5 power points, so I kind of don't want it to use it. I'm going to go for Toxic Spikes here, hoping I tank the Glavine Rush, and I actually do. Now, if anything other than Dragalge comes out, it will be poisoned, which would be nice. Now we can use Protect, tank another Glavine Rush, that should be 3, and of course, I can't really do anything here. I just use Protect in vain. I don't think you can double Protect anymore, and Glavine Rush knocks me out. Now I go into Arcanine, I set up Sunny Day, it goes for Glavine Rush, probably should have just gone for Protect, but Sunny Day can combo with Morning Sun to basically restore all my HP. It goes for Brick Break, which does next to nothing. Man, Will-O-Wisp would have been so much better. I wish I'd done that, but now I can start going for Roar. Unless I get flinched by this Icicle Crash, I don't. It roars in the Haxorus. Haxorus is a pretty good Pokemon for me because, again, physical attacks. And what I'm going to do is swap into Mabostiff. Haxorus actually has Rock Tomb as opposed to Earthquake, which is good. It goes for Dragon Claw. That means Rocky Helmet damage. I roar it out. Out comes Flapple. And Flapple, not a great Pokemon, to be honest. It goes for Dragon Rush and knocks out Mabostiff. I'm able to send in Jump Bluff and then send in Hippowdon because I'm expecting a Dragon Rush. Hopefully it hits and it misses, which sucks because it would have knocked it out. Now I've got to switch back into Jump Bluff. It goes for Leech Seed, which cannot affect Jump Bluff and gets knocked out. Now out comes Baxcalibur. Baxcalibur, however, does faint immediately, which is pretty lucky. Dragalge is going to take away the Toxic Spikes, and rather than going for the Leech Seed, I go into Spiritomb, and I am going to be using Curse as opposed to Trick. We just don't need to use Trick strats. Curse works well enough. And then the final Pokemon, Haxorus, faints immediately. So we win. All right, that's the Elite Four. It was all right. By the way, we actually lost a Hassel after 20 minutes. Not having Will-O-Wisp, again, literally the Flapple survived on 1 HP again, with Arcanine being the sole Pokemon remaining. So that's something to keep in mind if I ever do this in the future, which I promise you, I will never do a Pacifist run in Scarlet and Violet ever again. Oh my god. Anyway, it is champion time. And yeah, I mean, the strategy's been working so far. She has a pretty varied team. To be fair, the hardest trainer so far is Clavel, because Clavel actually had decent movesets and a type varied team. When we have Pokemon that are all one type, it's really, really easy to match up and find opportunities to roar. We've talked about that a few times, but it's just so true. And it just feels like this game is way too easy. But maybe the champion will be hard, and then the second champion, and then the secret boss. I don't know, let's hope. Alrighty, so Espathra does not have great moves. It has Lumina Crash, which is 80 base power. It actually goes for Reflect right away. I set up Stealth Rock. Now it's going to go for Lumina Crash, and that's going to drop my special defense. But here's the thing. I have a Pokemon I can swap into, or I can go for Protect, and Lumina Crash only has a limited number of power points, so I can swap in Spiritomb. It has 10 power points to be exact. Right now it's used 4. 2 on Fortress, 1 which I protected, and then Pressure makes 2 more on Spiritomb. I swap back into Fortress because it's going to go for Dazzling Gleam, which doesn't do all that much damage and allows me to set up another layer of spikes. It also seems to automatically go for Reflect when it runs out, which means I can set up, that's right, another layer of spikes, although I go for Protect to block Lumina Crash. And then, after I can't use Protect again, I go for that third layer of spikes. I can use another Protect, and yeah, I can just speed this part up. We're going to stall out the power points of Lumina Crash, allowing Fortress to basically do whatever it wants. And eventually, the only special attacking move this is going to have is Dazzling Gleam, and already it is going for Quick Attack. There's the opening. They won't switch out their Pokemon when I've done this. It's something that better trainers would do, but that's the opening. I can go for Roar, and out comes King Gambit, which is a bad matchup for Arcanine. That means Hippowdon's going to come in, since it counters this pretty well. There's the Stone Edge, which actually misses. It goes for Cowtown Cleave, and I go for Roar, and out comes Avalugg. Now, Avalugg is a good matchup, but I'm just going to go for Roar anyway. Avalanche did way more than I thought it would. but I roar it out and out comes a Spathra. For whatever reason, it went for Quick Attack as opposed to Dazzling Gleam, which was really weird. And then it went for Dazzling Gleam against Arcanine, just strange. Anyway, back in comes Kingambit after Roar. I go back into Hippowdon, it goes for Stone Edge. I get hit this time, but I go for Slack Off. Kowtow Cleave hits, and it's damaged by Rocky Helmet. I go for Slack Off, it goes for Kowtow Cleave and faints. I think I keep calling it Cowtown Cleave, which is a much funnier name, but it's Kowtow Cleave. If I'm saying that, I'm sorry. It's just, that's a way funnier name. I like that. Anyway, Veluza comes in. Veluza is a good matchup against both Hippowdon and Arcanine, so I have to swap into Jumpluff. But it has Rocky Helmet, Sandstorm, Poisoning, and then I decide to swap into Mabostiff because it has Ice Fang. Like I said, I did start looking up movesets, so I was able to predict that pretty well, and out comes Gogoat, which is poisoned. I swap into Arcanine. It goes for Play Rough, which is what I was expecting, which is why I went to Arcanine. It went for Bulk Up. I roar back in Avalugg, and Avalugg faints because it's Ice type. Now out comes Gogoat. I go for Roar after it bulks up again. Espathra comes out. Espathra faints. Gogoat comes out. Gogoat faints. And the final Pokemon is Glamora. Just realized it could have gotten rid of the Toxic Spikes at any point. And now all I need to go is go into Jumpluff. It's going to go for Earth Power. And because I'm Flying type right now, that's going to miss. Then I go for Sleep Powder. I go for Leech Seed. At this point, I know I've won. It's just a matter of how fast we're going to win. And we're not going to win that fast. I'm not able to get Curse Up. But I am going to be able to use Jumpluff in order to stall this out. And because, here's a fun little thing, because it's terastallized, I can poison it. And Leech Seed Jumpluff, what started this whole run, is going to cement my status as a champion. Of course, unlike a normal game where credits would roll, we have to fight Nemona for the billionth time, because I guess Nemona is better than the champion, or you have to battle the champion in the postgame. I don't really care. I'm not doing postgame. Let's go beat Nemona and then beat the secret boss. The strategy is working way too well to try and change things up. Now, here's the funny thing. Lycanroc uses Stealth Rocks. This didn't happen with Copperaja, but the thing that is kind of scary is I like to switch Pokemon a lot voluntarily. This is actually a really good counter to my strategy of always making sure I have the perfect matchup. Also, this Pokemon is higher level. For once, I'm not at the same level as the opponent's Pokemon, and that's going to hurt, especially once I get critted. I go for Toxic Spikes, I go for Protect, I need Stone Edge to miss. Of course, it's not doing that, so I set up Spikes, and it seems like I'm not going to quite get the amount of setup I want, so I swap in Hippowdon. It goes for Stone Edge. It does, I mean, decent enough damage. Drill Run, you know, like, it's not terrible. I go for Slack Off, and at this point, I'm just letting Rocky Helmet do its job. Then I roar it out, and out comes Goodra. So, Goodra, in theory, I could maybe swap in Fortress, but I keep in Hippowdon. Muddy Water does a ton, way more than I was expecting. And now out comes the Quackquavel. I get it, it's like Quack Quack. I get it, how cute. Anyway, what's not cute is that this thing has Aqua Step, and that's a good attack. But Skuntank, yeah, Skuntank is on for Mabostiff. It can get some Aftermath going, and of course, Skuntank survives. But thankfully, Sandstorm subsides, and it goes for Aqua Step again, which is actually good, because after Rocky Helmet, Poison, and Aftermath, the Quackquavel faints. So now I can send in Fortress, and this time, Lycanroc is out of Stone Edges, so I can go for Protect. Of course, the Stealth Rocks hurt me there a little bit. I can start trying to set up a little bit more. I still have to go for Protect to try and get as much HP back as possible. I'm able to set up that third layer of spikes, and Lycanroc faints. Now out comes Pawmot. I really don't know what I can do. I go for Protect, Close Combat, and now I decide to swap out into Jumpluff. It goes for Double Shock, which removes its electric typing and Rocky Helmet damage. I decide to Terastallize and use Synthesis. It goes for Ice Sponge, so that was a good predict by me. and Palmont actually faints, which I wasn't sure it was going to, which is good. Now out comes Goodra. I'm going to swap into Fortress. It goes for Ice Beam, and Fortress did its job. Now out comes Arcanine. I go for Sunny Day. It goes for Muddy Water, which because of Sunny Day doesn't do as much damage, and Goodra faints due to poisoning. Orthworm comes out, and Orthworm's pretty scary. I go into Jumpluff. It goes for Earthquake, and I tank it on 5 HP. I go for Synthesis, which in the sun does way more. I think it's 75%. Iron Tail misses. Leech Seed hits. Iron Tail plus Rocky Helmet plus Leech Seed. My defense is dropped, however, so I swap into Hippowdon. It goes for Iron Tail, and somehow I'm actually able to tank it. Orthworm then knocks out Hippowdon. Out comes the Dunsparce, and out comes Spiritomb. And we're going to finish this off with Curse. It actually does a ton of damage with Dragon Rush. But my longest serving Pokemon, Arcanine and Jumpluff, are going to be able to take this home. And that's it. That is everything, other than, of course, the final battle against the prehistoric Pokemon. In my Fuecoco run, the only run that made it this far because Magikarp was unable to get past all the Team Star members, this battle was brutally difficult. But will my Pacifist Pokemon be able to make quick work of them? No, it's going to take like half an hour. But will I win first try? Only one way to find out. She leads with Slitherwing. Now, I know we've just accepted that's what these things are called, but can I just say I hate the names? I think it's kind of cool as like a mystery, and then they get like weird prehistoric Pokemon names. That's kind of what I thought would happen. I don't know, maybe I'm alone here, but we lead with Jumpluff. Now, Slitherwing is not a fire type like Volcarona, and of course it's able to avoid Sleep Powder, but Low Sweep actually doesn't do all that much. I'm able to put it to sleep. You know what's coming. We're getting the Leech Seed on, and now we send out... What? No Fortress? What is this? Yes, so you can catch these earlier. They're just really, really hard to find. And I'm going to send out Glamora. So Glamora, I'm going to use Acid Armor just in case. It goes for Zen Headbutt here, and it actually misses. And you're going to see how much damage that would have done if it would have hit. Spoiler, it's a lot. Now, I'm going to go for Stealth Rock. It goes for Zen Headbutt. And with Acid Armor, well, I think I would have been just able to survive. The reason I switched to Glamora is that Toxic Debris automatically uses Toxic Spikes. Of course, I flinch, and that means I'm probably not going to be able to use Spikes at all. It also has Spiky Shield, which is able to not just protect it, but deal damage. So it is overall a much, much better Fortress, which itself was a better Clodsire, and I wasn't able to use Stealth Rocks. Okay, no entry hazards for the final battle. Let's go. Well, there's Toxic Spikes, but nothing else. All right, so different strats come in here. We're going to go for Sleep Powder. Slitherwing is knocked out. All right, next is Screamtail. I believe she always sends out her Pokemon in the same order. Now, Screamtail doesn't really have great moves against Arcanine, so we're kind of just going to stall here. Thanks to Glamora, we actually have Toxic Spikes out, and we can even swap in Spiritomb for the Zen Headbutts and then Arcanine for the Play Roughs, which, along with Protect, will cause Screamtail to faint to toxic damage. Next comes out the Brute Bonnet, aka not Amoonguss. So I'm going to trick the Choice Scarf, and it decides to go for Payback, which is not going to do very much to the Pokemon coming out, Mabostiff. At this point, I probably could have gotten one with Intimidate, but you know, who needs it? I'm just going to stall a little bit. I'm not going to use Roar because there's no point, and eventually the Brute Bonnet gets knocked out. Now out comes Fluttermane. Fluttermane goes for Thunderbolt. I go for Swagger, and some funny stuff's about to happen. It hits itself in Confusion once. I go for Swagger again. It doesn't hit itself in Confusion a second time. Thunderbolt, though, is protected, but it does hit itself in Confusion 2 out of 3 times, and that means Mabostiff knocks out Fluttermane with a little bit of swagger. Let's go. Sandy Shocks comes out next, and it goes for discharge and knocks out Mabostiff. Now out comes Jumpluff. I'm going to Terrastalize. I'm going to use Leech Seed. It goes for Power Gem. And now Leech Seed Toxic combo along with Synthesis is going to do what I need it to do and slowly but surely knock out these Sandy Shocks. So now all that's left is the Salamence, the Roaring Moon, but despite the fact it has wings, it's actually not a flying type, and thus it is toxic poisoned. And although Jumpluff does faint, Hippowdon, which I could have used earlier, it has been an MVP, just as able to stall it out, and that is Pacifist Scarlet and Violet. Thanks everyone for watching. I really want to do more Pacifist challenges. Maybe Gen 4. That seems like a fun challenge to do it in. I don't know. That or Gen 5 or Gen 6. We'll see. I'm going to be doing more of the challenges I've done before and see if we can get a bunch of different series going at the same time. Kind of change it up a little bit. I don't know. Let me know if you want that. Anyway, I'm going to go back to making videos. This video took forever to make, as you can tell by how long it's been between videos. So yeah, I'm going to go do that. Take care.